Michelle. Welcome back from
Hey.
running around the country.
It's been a minute, but it's been
has.
good.
You got to go to my favorite place last week.
Yes.
Got to go to New York.
I know. It is one of my favorite places, and the weather was perfect. So it wasn't a heavy coat time, no snow, no rain. It was in the high 40s, sunny,
Was
low
the Christmas
wind.
tree up?
It was not. You know why? So it was, but they had casing around it because they had an issue with it this year. And so there was scaffolding around all of it. So
wow.
that was kind of disappointing, but all the Christmas shops were up and all of that sort of stuff. So got to see
up
that.
Fifth Avenue.
Yeah, and then Bryan Park. They had the ones in Bryan Park. Grand Central had theirs going on.
Yeah. So pretty. Such a neat place. Well, we got to go with work, right?
Yes.
So it was a work trip. So yeah, you're probably not feeling this subject today, right?
No, not at all.
This subject that we're going to be talking about today is, last time we were on together, which has been a minute because we've had some things come up. But last time that we were on together, we talked about job hopping and what, leads to job hopping sometimes. And this is kind of that next level, right? When is it time to give up on a job? And I want to start us off with a little clip from The Office. It seems like we always kind of play clips from The Office, but they're so dang appropriate. But this one is really just kind of funny because this is a pretty, when you're feeling this way, it's a pretty good sign that that it might be, time to quit. But we're gonna watch this little clip real quick, and it's only about a minute, but here we go.
So, where do you work, Peter?
In a tech.
And what do you do there?
I sit in a cubicle and I update bank software for the 2000 switch. Well, see, they wrote all this bank software, and to save space, they used 2 digits for the date instead of 4. So like 98 instead of 1998. So I go through these thousands of lines of code, and it doesn't really matter. I don't like my job, and I don't think I'm going to go anymore.
You're just not going to go?
Yeah.
Won't you get fired?
I don't know. But I really don't like it, and I'm not going to go.
So you're going to quit?
Nuh-uh, not really. I'm just going to stop going.
When did you decide all of that?
About an hour ago.
Really?
Yeah.
About an hour ago. So are you going to get another job?
I don't think I'd like another job.
What are you going to do about money and bills and...
I've never really liked paying bills. I don't think I'm going to do that either.
Well, so what do you want to do?
I want to take you out to dinner. And then I want to go back to my apartment and watch Kung Fu. Do you ever watch Kung Fu?
I love Kung Fu.
Channel 39.
Totally.
You should come over and watch Kung Fu tonight.
Okay.
Great.
Okay. Can we order lunch first?
Yeah.
So, where do you work?
So when you get to that point, maybe might be time to go.
Yeah, I think so.
That reminds me of that whole clip. Reminds me of that concept that went around a couple of years ago. The whole quiet thing, where people weren't really
quiet quitting. Is that what it was? Yes.
And then of course there's quiet firing when your company is trying to let you go. But I think all of us have probably stayed in a job at some point in our career where it was kind of over. We were feeling it was over, almost like the relationship status in Facebook. What is your relationship status? It's complicated.
Right. Or where you start fantasizing about quitting mid-Zoom, right? Yeah. Don't worry. We've all been through that.
For sure. When, you start feeling like their heads are just like the Peanuts commercial, right? They're going, wah, 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 and you're like not even paying attention anymore. And, some people would call that burnout, but and sometimes it is burnout. Sometimes it is just needing, a reset, but other times it's beyond that. And so today, that's what we're going to be talking about, right? Is that question reason that so many, I would say, it's women, because we're typically talking about women, but I would say everybody, really wrestles with from time to time, and knowing, am I just burnt out, or is this relationship way too complicated? Is it beyond repair? When is it time to give up? When do you stick it out? And when do you finally just call it quits and say enough is enough?
Absolutely. So welcome back to the Business Chicks podcast. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Kim. And together we have, every time I say this, it just makes me giggle, more than 60 combined years of experience in sales, marketing, and leadership, which means there have been times we've both stayed too long in a few places and probably left too soon in a few others.
True. And tonight we're going to dive into the red flags, the gut checks, and the mindset shift that tells you it's time to go.
Yeah, because, there's many reasons we stay, right? There's so many. And I would say first and foremost, we think, at least most of us think, it's for a paycheck, right? We are in a society, I would start to say a country, but really a world where money makes the world go round. It's literally an expression. And so money is important when we have family, we have personal responsibilities. And I would say family is even more important sometimes than personal. We stay a lot of times for our family, but we also stay for comfort, fear, or even guilt. So there's so many reasons, right?
Exactly. Especially women, we stay longer. We're loyal. There's our teams, our bosses, even the chaos we help clean up. We don't want to be the one who quits when things get messy.
Absolutely not. It's so funny that you say that, because that seems to be, like, in my history, I don't know about yours, in my history, it seems to be the case where sometimes when I really did need to go is when I dug in my heels and really, because you don't want to quit in the chaos, right? You want to leave in a good spot. And so unfortunately, what that sometimes means is that loyalty, that can be a good thing in many relationships, becomes a betrayal of ourselves. And we're just digging this hole, and it's just getting deeper and deeper, and we're getting deeper and deeper. And what may have started as burnout and maybe could have been rectified or corrected with some time off or a vacation or any of those things becomes irreparable, right? It becomes unfixable, and where it really shouldn't be fixed at that point, because we're just getting worse and worse. So according to Forbes, the average person stays in a job they've outgrown for 2 years longer than they should. 2 years. And 70% of women say that they have stayed in a job or a role out of obligation, not opportunity. So in other words, they didn't leave because they got a better opportunity, or they didn't leave to find a better opportunity. They left because they felt like they couldn't or shouldn't leave. There was even a whole TikTok trend, right, about when you're mentally done, but still logging into Teams. And I think that, maybe not Teams, because I think Teams for me is relatively new, but Zoom, right?
Right.
Zoom is, logging into Zoom when we're still done. And I keep mentioning burnout, and that's because, it's weird thing to be certified in, but and I know you are this way with resilience, and they go very close to hand in hand. But
absolutely,
I keep burnout, because burnout is a real thing. It is real. It's not just I'm tired, or even though that's part of it. It's not just I can't do this anymore. I have seen recently, in recent years, and I think you probably know who I'm talking about, somebody spiral into burnout, and I've witnessed it firsthand. And while I theoretically knew what burnout was, when you watch it happen, and it's basically watching somebody in the throes of burnout who hasn't addressed it, they will self-destruct. And I think that's largely because of that disloyalty or betrayal of one's self. And there's many reasons we get there, right?
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not burnout, right? Sometimes it's misalignment. There's a difference between having a tough season and being in the wrong ecosystem.
That whole wrong, what is it? Good to great. Jim Collins says we need to have the right people on the bus and the right seats on the bus. Well, what if you're just on the wrong bus? That's where that kind of wrong ecosystem comes in. And so, we ask ourselves, or we need to ask ourselves, am I just tired? Am I not, do I need a break, right? Am I snapping at people? Am I finding myself unmotivated? or am I done? Because, burnout can be fixed. Burnout can be resolved if it's caught early enough. It can be fixed with rest. It can be fixed with relaxation. But in general, when you're just done, especially if there's misalignment, whatever,
Right.
it is disloyal. It is betrayal of self to stay.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you have to check yourself on those, right? Because I feel like sometimes burnout is a situation where, you need rest because you're, as we've talked about this too, you're not delegating enough.
Right.
You're not, you're putting in too much into something. I have the habit of, if I'm on a project and I get into, I go down the rabbit hole and it's really bad. And that truly can create burnout that we're talking about here, and that's something that you can self-adjust with.
Absolutely. And resilience, and I know you're working on your course on resilience. Resilience is so important to burnout, and it can be what we call a burnout buffer, right? Resilience is one of those, hope, optimism. Those are all things, called psych-hat that can become buffers, resilience being one of them, buffers to burnout. And or by building those things, there's a synergistic effect that helps to treat burnout. But let's talk about that misalignment. I'm going off script here for a second. I think you'll go with me. I think you'll follow me right there. But let's talk about that misalignment. Sometimes when or when you might know that you have outgrown a job or a role is when you all of a sudden, kind of wake up one day and there is misalignment. And by that, what I mean is, when you're going along and you're operating under one assumption that this is the plan, this is what I'm doing, this is where my growth plan is. And then you realize that you haven't grown with your company, you've grown divergent to your company. And I think, in my perspective, that is one of the biggest, and I know we're going to talk about, bad fit, some of the symptoms of a bad fit, but I think when you realize that you've grown in different directions, almost like a relationship, right? Like they tell you, one of the early signs of divorce or, is when you've grown in different directions. Because once you start going in different directions, then chances are you're not going to make your way back to the middle. And I don't mean just like different interests or maybe different projects, but when you have fundamentally different goals and beliefs about what direction your career should be going, what direction the work that you're doing should be going, I think that's when it becomes scary.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely agreed. And I think part of that too is sometimes when, companies will tell you that they have a direction for you when you start there. And this has been my experience in the past. Again, not where I am now, but in the past, they bring you in and this is their thought process. This is what's happening and you're coming in here, but we're going to grow into this, and I watch it with, I watch it with younger people around me that I talk to, and I see where companies just kind of dangle that a little bit. And then that misalignment happens when you realize that it's not happening. They're dangling that carrot, but there's no progression on their part. You're making steps, you're making strides. And that is also where the misalignment starts. And that's where the resilience comes in, when you have to make that determination that the misalignment is not your fault. It's not anything that you did, but that misalignment is there. And you either have to put it in check and figure out if they're going to do the right thing or if it's time to move on.
Right. Absolutely. And, in our script notes, we have, other signs of a bad fit, right? Stop learning, or worse, caring. And I think there again, that's that divergence, right? You stopped learning when you feel like you can't learn anything more from your company. And yet there is not that opportunity for advancement or to grow. And you have to decide, am I okay being where I am? Is this it for me? Right. Or if it's not, and we'll talk about just in a second, trying to change them, just like, again, like a relationship, right? Trying to change it. But, I think it goes back to that alignment. So, you're managing your boss instead of being mentored. If someone that is supposed to be your mentor is just not getting it right, and you find that you're constantly having to redirect and explain, and you're explaining the same things over and over, or you know, your Sunday scaries start on Saturday or Friday, you know, oh my gosh, it's but I have to go back Monday. And then your value isn't recognized no matter what or how you deliver. And it's just, you know, it's unfortunate. And I think we as women, we just keep trying, right? We keep trying a lot of times, and men too, but I think women especially, we keep trying long past the expiration date.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there is a gender layer there, right? When a man leaves, he's strategic. And when a woman leaves, she's emotional or unstable. And we've talked about that, you know, in previous episodes as well. But I do think that is a valid issue that women think about and men don't.
Absolutely. I think that too. We do worry about how we're going to be perceived. We talked about it in the job hopping, you know, that a lot of times on a resume that, you know, it will seem like the man or people who are interviewed will say, oh, well, he was strategic. He made these decisions strategically. But sometimes a woman isn't looked at the same way. It's, you know, a lot of times the go-to, and we've talked about this before, is, oh, well, you know, she had family responsibilities, or she didn't get along with somebody, or, right? And it's just, I mean, I guess it boils down to men are perceived to pivot, right? Or to grow. And a lot of times, one of the things we also talked about in the resume one is how men will often apply for the next job, the job that they don't yet have experience for, their next move upward, versus a lot of times women are afraid to do that or don't get that opportunity. So it kind of seems like women are moving laterally versus men are moving vertically. And that can be harmful, and it can be nerve-wracking for us.
Oh, absolutely. And I think part of it is too, right? We worry about burning bridges. I mean, I think all of us have been, you know, for so long been taught, don't burn bridges, don't burn bridges. But sometimes those bridges is leading to nowhere. So, you know, they say, you know, it's a bridge that needs to be burned, because if that person doesn't value you here and you go to another company and that person's there, they're not going to value you anymore at another company. So what good does that bridge really do you?
Right. Good point. Good point. And, you know, it again, it goes back to that whole, we don't like to give up, right? Women, we don't like to give up, and we don't like to give in. And, you know, often in relationships, we feel like, oh, well, we can change things, you know, if we are good enough. And there's that misperception. If I was good enough, I could make him, them, it change, right? Whether that's a relationship, whether that is a job. You know, we take that on so internally, like it's me. I'm not good enough to change them, right? So we keep trying, and we keep, well, let me try it this way. Let me pivot and try it this way. If I keep trying, if I just do the right thing, you know, we really tie it to our self-worth. And
absolutely,
I think, you know, that's one of the things that I think is so unfortunate. And it's really just, I think, a factor of us being women. And so I'm going to share this clip. I know we've talked about her before. I love Mel Robbins, and she is just amazing. But this is actually, I came across this video clip, and she actually is talking about a relationship. But when she was going through all this, I was like, you know, same signs for a job. So I'm going to play this.
You cannot change another human being. Their behavior is telling you the truth. Their behavior is telling you what they care about and what their priorities are. And if their behavior is telling you that your needs are not a priority, you have to let them reveal that. Because then you're going to come back to the second part, which is, let me ask myself, is this kind of behavior from somebody what I deserve? Is this what I'm willing to accept in somebody? Because again, what do we also know? People only change when they want to or they can. And you may decide, if that's the case, to still love and accept the person. But there may be times where you have had the conversation and it is very clear they're capable of it. They just won't do it. And then you start making excuses and resentment builds. And you stay in something, seeing exactly who someone is, wishing they would change, living up here in your mind about the fantasy of what you wish this was, refusing to accept the reality of what it actually is. You cannot change another human being. Their behavior.
I love her. That whole let them, you know, concept. It just blew me away kind of how much, you know, that is like work, right? Is a lot of times we tell ourselves long after we should, okay, well, it's going to change. It's going to get better, or I can fix it. I can do this. And we stop paying attention to what is really there in front of us. And there again, therein lies that self-betrayal, right? When we start building resentment. And then, and here's the scary part, at least I know I keep saying that, but this is the really scary part, I think, is we could do ourselves more damage than good, because, if we leave on a high note, right, whenever it's good, that's one thing. We've got a good reference. We've got a good, a good story to tell for our next job, whatever. But if we let it go, we can actually end up shooting ourselves in the foot and just really doing ourselves more harm than good, because then we have that resentment. Then do we have negative conversations? That one person that I was telling you about, where I experienced or watched them go through burnout, they literally exploded every bridge that they were going to have in the throes of burnout, right? So they would have just, 3 months earlier, either taken the vacation or moved on. They would have left a positive note, but instead they, stayed past the expiration date and became spoiled, and the whole relationship became spoiled. And so, here is kind of our checklist moment, right? The signs that it's time to walk away. Aside from what we just talked about, what are the signs, Michelle, that it's just
right? So you dread Mondays more than you look forward to the weekends. Like, we all dread Mondays, right? To an extent, just because it's a Monday, not necessarily because of anything.
Yeah. You've been at home, you've been doing things with family, and then all of a sudden you're back to the desk situation.
Right.
I get it. When it's just dread, like,
there's a true difference, right? And then you've outgrown your boss. And basically, to me, that is something about the person that you're reporting to. Number one, doesn't understand your position or what you're doing, and is not having conversations with you about your vision of where that should be going. So to me, that's my interpretation of that. You're underpaid and undervalued, meaning that there's no discussions about that, right? There's no discussions about where you're moving in the company, no discussions about, any of that sort of thing. The company's direction conflicts with your values. That's a big one to me, because when you start seeing a company go in the wrong direction based on what it was previously or anything like that, where it's not moving in a direction that you can see it's going to have longevity because of bad leadership or values or lack of values, then that's a whole part of it too, to me. Your health, mental or physical, is suffering. And, this is a great example. And my kids can tell you this too, that when I was in these sort of positions that I didn't feel like cooking dinner at night, and I was a single parent, I didn't feel like cooking dinner at night. I literally just wanted to do nothing and not think about anything. And that's, that gets into your mental part of it when you're in that situation. And then it starts affecting your physical side.
Burnout has some very real physical ramifications. Like, I mean, I can't remember the exact percentage, but I did a whole presentation on burnout several times for the Navy, NAVSEA, shipbuilding. And one of the things that really struck me is the physical ramifications, like absenteeism, surgeries. Like, there is a close correlation between burnout and surgeries that have to be performed. Headaches, stomach ache, all of the immune system. So yeah, I mean, if you are seeing that you're sick all the time, that might be like, something else going on, right?
Absolutely. And if it's affecting your out of work life, right? Like, that's a big thing. You don't want to go out and do anything. You don't, all of these things are happening. And then you become the fixer instead of the future, right? You're trying to fix the things in the company that you see wrong. And that's, again, another sideline of you're not in the right spot, because we all have situations where we're reactive to stuff because of a situation. Right. But to be a fixer where that's what you're focusing on, it's not in alignment. It's more than just, it's a misalignment on so many levels to me.
Absolutely. If you are constantly in reactive mode, and then you're not moving forward, right? I mean, And that's like you said, every now and then we all find that we have to react. But unless that is your position, like QC, right? Or something where that is what you're supposed to be doing all of the time. If that's what you're doing in many other jobs, like if that's what you're doing in my field in marketing, then that you're doing something wrong, right? Because typically most of the time you're supposed to be looking forward, especially in the senior position.
Right.
And, I think that is one of those big, again, warning signs. But, Mel said something in her video that, you can either accept it or you got to accept that it's not going to change and move on. So that's a key point too, is there may be times in our life, right, depending on family responsibilities, those kind of things, when we do have to accept it, but that needs to be a conscious choice. Right? It needs to be, okay, I'm accepting it and here's why, so that we don't feel like a victim. So that allows you to take some of that power back. But, there are certain roles and maybe some, there are certain roles where people are perfectly content to go in, 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever, for 30 years and do the same exact thing and really not see a career progression plan, not have room for growth. That's what they want, right? And so for those people, maybe that's one discussion in your head. Maybe you are perfectly content with that. Then that's something you've got to rectify with yourself. But like when we talk about job hopping, if that is not okay with you and you have found your opportunities gone, right? Either there's nowhere more to go or it's just not going to happen, then back to that, you're doing yourself a disservice by remaining longer, right? And that's what I think ultimately as women, we've got to understand is there is no more, or shouldn't be. I just shouldn't say there is no. There shouldn't be in our minds this perception of valor for sticking out a bad situation.
Right. Absolutely. But, before you rage quit on Slack, let's be strategic about it.
Absolutely. I'm going to play this little short video about 3 signs it's time to leave your current job, because these 3 signs, if you're seeing these 3 signs, like you just said, then it's time to go ahead and do that preparing, because I would say all the signs we talked about are good. These 3 are, to me, if you're seeing these 3, then yeah, it is time to prepare, because you are getting to that point where, just like you just said, you're probably about to rage quit on Slack and it's not going to be a good thing. You're going to self-destruct everything before you get ready to go. Here we go.
One of the most common questions I get is, how do you know when it's time to go? And I have 3 ways to know when it's time to leave your job. First, it's time to go when you have too much self-respect to stay. In other words, if you're feeling undervalued, if you're feeling there is managerial abuse going on, if you are feeling underappreciated, you need to have enough respect for yourself that you know it's time to go, and go somewhere that does have that same respect for you. Second of all, your body will scream at you. I interviewed almost 80 people in this book, other people who had quit their jobs without having anything lined up. And one of the commonalities is that you get some sort of odd physical ailment. They were perfectly in shape, and all of a sudden they had terrible back problems. People who got migraines for the first time in their lives. So your body will tell you, and you need to pay attention to it. The third sign is, if you are asking the question, how will I know when it's time to go? It's time. You owe it to yourself, because you have one life to live, to get out of a situation that isn't bringing you some element of joy every day. If you're dreading Sunday night and going to work the next morning on a regular basis, you need to pay attention to that.
Yeah. So, that's pretty much everything we were saying. And it's kind of rough. It's kind of hard to think about, because again, we don't like to give up, right? And sometimes it can feel like leaving your family. It can feel like, letting or grieving, and often it can feel like grieving. And so before this is just kind of a little segue. Before you do this, you need to also plan. I don't know. I came across this and I wasn't really even sure how to fit it in, but we got to. So this is a little, before you do this is how it says how to quit a job. I would say how not to quit a job.
Excuse me, everybody. Eric, Jake, everyone. I got an announcement to make, and I got my friends here to help me out. Guys, hit it.
I am quitting this job today. Hey, I'm leaving. Even though I like it here, want to start a new career, gonna make it to the top and start my coffee shop. I am moving on. Got to go. Why I sing so, yeah. I am quitting this job today. Hey. Go. You know I said I'm gone, yeah.
That's great.
Isn't that cute? I was
That's
like,
great.
and I'm like, I'm not sure where to fit that in, but it's got to go in. It's got to go in there. So yeah, the signs it's time to walk away. We talked about that, but let's talk about the smart exit. So there's a difference between quitting emotionally and exiting intentionally. So the steps, right? Know why, and be able to clearly articulate that, because chances are you're going to have an exit interview, and your exit interview is going to go in your permanent record.
Yeah, and I think there's two things to this why to me. So the why needs to be why you're leaving, as far as what the issue is with the job, but it also needs to be the why you're leaving, as far as what your why is for doing things that you do, right? So my why was my kids and that sort of thing, but it was my kids of why I didn't need to be in the mindset of coming home and being mentally exhausted, right? So there's two different whys in that, in my opinion.
Very good point. Your professional why and your personal why. You know, why, very good point. Why you're doing it, why you're leaving the company you're leaving, and why you're going, right?
Yes, perfect. That's perfect.
Why you're leaving this company and why you're going and where you're going and what you're hoping to accomplish, and being very clear. And then I would say, this isn't in our show notes, but I would say, if you're going somewhere else, make sure that you've done your due diligence. You're not coming from the, what I always mess up analogies, the frying pan into the fire.
Frying pan into the fire.
Make sure that it's truly a smart move. Don't react emotionally. Do your research. You've been promised things. I would say get it in writing, you know, as much as possible, and then build your financial cushion, because what if, you know, you jump ship and it's a bad move? It doesn't work out. You don't want to undo years of smart career, smart business, smart financial planning, and, you know, activity just in a moment. And I've seen many people do that. That same person, you know, I was talking about burnout, did that. And not only did he kind of blow up his, you know, situation, but financially too. And it again comes down to that. I think probably waiting too long. Did, you know, kind of blow up, right? And in that process, line up your next move quietly. I would say, don't make bold statements like, I hate this effing place, you know. Just and really, you know, again, burning the bridge before you get to it. Burning the bridge before you crossed it, and then control your narrative. Lead with grace, not gossip. And that's, you know, not blaming. Don't blame, because you're past blame, right? I mean, you can throw mud. It's not going to do anybody any good to throw mud and to just in your exit interview tell them everything they've ever done wrong at this company. That's you should have worked on that from a positive perspective long before you got to this point. At this point, in my opinion, you can make, and I'm really interested in hearing your opinion about this, but I feel like at this point, you can make suggestions like, hey, this could probably be better if you might want to look at this. This is not the time to put everything out there that you feel like is wrong with the company, because I just don't think that's going to do any good. I think that is going to, if anything, you're throwing a grenade. You know what I mean? That's not even just burning the bridge. You're just blowing it the freak up, right? And I think, that comes across as emotional, and that comes across as unstable when those conversations, those things should have been discussed earlier.
Correct.
And so that would be kind of a caveat too, is before you get to this point, if you're not at this point where you think you need to go, if you're just starting to feel those minutes of frustration, that's a sign for you to start having these conversations. Don't wait until you feel like you're ready to quit and start throwing everything at the wall. Make sure that you are communicating, because to be fair, people can't read our mind, right? What Mel was saying, if you've communicated it and they have the power to change things or not, that's one thing. But if you have not communicated it, I think it's unfair to just all of a sudden just start, right? Here's everything that's wrong with you.
Right.
Out.
I think it's unfair to the person who's exiting as well. I mean, every exit, it's part of your brand. It's part of your story. It's, everybody that comes in for an interview or all of that. We all have our stories. We've had that conversation. And you want people to say, oh, she left with class, or she left on a good note, or, she left things, whatever. You don't want to say she burned it down walking out the door. And,
yeah.
You also want to realize that it's not about burning bridges at that point, because if you haven't at this point had conversations about what you feel is wrong or inadequate or whatever the situation is, then you are as culpable as the company that's not doing anything. Because if they don't, and they may completely know, but if you haven't used your voice in that capacity, and you're just leaving because you don't think they want to hear your voice, you're not giving them the benefit either. And you're probably going to walk into a very similar situation if you don't run through that whole path, in my
Absolutely.
opinion.
No, very good point. And that's kind of what I was thinking too. It's like sometimes we build these narratives in our head, and I think everybody does this at times to an extent. But we build these narratives, these stories in our head, and sometimes we might be resentful and might be held back from growth simply because we haven't said anything. Because, it's that whole, when you assume, you make an ass out of you and me kind of thing, is we start assuming that we know, oh, well, there is no room for growth for me. There is no path for me. There is no future here. We start getting into this dire kind of state of mind that sometimes we need to regroup and say, how can I use this discomfort? How can I use this to drive me forward? What conversations do I need to have? Asking ourselves those questions, because, ultimately, as you said, it's kind of, we have a responsibility for sure in our career growth that sometimes we have to be uncomfortable and have uncomfortable conversations if we're going to make forward progress.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's one of those things, again, it goes back to resilience too, right? Until you get to that point, you have to go through it, to get through it. You have to just hit it face on and head on and do that. But it's not easy to do that. And sometimes that's about maturity and growth within business and things like that. So it is, I understand for a younger scenario where it can be difficult to have those conversations and feel like you just have to move on, because that's not going to change, because you don't feel like you have the power to change that or the voice to change that. And sometimes they don't. So in that capacity, I can see where you would not necessarily say something, but you just need it's time to move on. And that's fine. Again, your exit is not the time. Yeah, your exit is not the time to blast all that out, because if you haven't gotten to that point, then you're probably not ready to have that conversation then either.
Right. Yeah. And when you were talking, it made me think about, is it worth it? Right. Do I want to fix this? Is it worth fixing? Is this a place I love? Is this a team I love? Is this people I love? Is it worth fixing? If the answer is yes, theoretically, then, okay, then we ask ourselves the next question. Do I think this can be fixed for real? Like, not just wishful thinking, not just I can change them, but maybe something that is, not necessarily at the heart of who the company is or who your boss or leadership is, but, is this something that can be changed with conversation? Can we develop a plan? And I think that is kind of one of the keys is if you can have that conversation and say, I understand that maybe there isn't growth now or that we can't do this now, but is this something we can work toward in the future? Can we create a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 5 year plan? If the answer is no, that tells you one thing. But if the answer is, well, maybe, or let's talk about it, or let's see, then that's another thing, right? Then that can give you at least an idea of, is this something that could be fixed, right? Is this something that maybe it's just a matter of working on it, working together? Because I will have to say too, sometimes we're impatient. Sometimes I'm impatient, right? Especially when I want something, I'm so driven, I'm so driven, ambitious. When I want something, sometimes it is like full steam ahead. I've got to check myself and say, am I being reasonable or unreasonable? Am I just, wanting a timetable that isn't feasible, or am I really, suffering? And in my past, there was a job that I think I probably left too early, because it was like that, where it was just, I did react emotionally, where it was just like, I can't take this anymore but I also wasn't mature enough at the time to really put in the effort to fix it. It was just, I can't take this anymore. But I will have to say, I don't know looking back that it would have been worth it anyway. So maybe it was better, but I do know that I didn't handle that correctly because I didn't do the things that we're talking about. I didn't find out what the long-term plan was. It was just a little bit more emotional reaction. And, and while that job probably wasn't worth it, you don't want to lose a job that is worth it that way.
Yeah. And to your point, growth isn't supposed to be easy, right? It's going to feel awkward. You're going to have pains, because if you can easily walk into these places and be like, here's what needs to change, then there is nowhere for you to grow, because you're already that person.
Right.
So you've got to be able to grow in, in coming into new companies and in starting new jobs and doing different things like that. You also sometimes have to sit back and watch what's going on before you decide how things should be. You can't bring your past into, your previous position, your previous location, your whatever. You can't bring that into a company and just be like, it'd be better if you did it this way. Well, there's a reason you left your old company.
Right.
And so you have to put it in perspective. And if you don't know how the current company is actually functioning as a whole,
right,
sometimes you have to sit back and be uncomfortable for a little bit and just take it in to then be able to make the recommendations, as opposed to just walking in and, like a bull in a china shop. You can't just do that, or you shouldn't just do that, in my opinion. Yes, they hired you for your expertise, but part of the expertise should be sitting back and kind of overview of, how can I make this better? Can I make it better? Are they willing to take the steps to make it better? But that's going to be awkward and painful. And, you can't confuse stretching with suffering.
Correct.
And if the problem is solvable, then fix it. Fix it. And that goes back to the fix it before you flee.
Yep, that's a good way to put it, because and it's knowing the rules, and it's so interesting that you said that, because it's one of the expressions I use a lot, is you got to really know the rules, understand them, understand why they're there, what they were put in place to accomplish before you can break them. In my opinion, that's one of the pieces of advice I give all the time in my leadership classes is know the rules, understand them, make sure you know why, what they were intended to solve. Before you break them, once you know all that, then you can decide if they truly need to be changed.
Absolutely.
Because until you know all that, you're operating at half half knowledge. You're operating with half the information you need, and you don't know why. You cannot make accurate leadership judgment decisions without knowing the why things were put into place. And
Absolutely.
it's so risky. And so, a lot of times we do sometimes go into jobs, into roles. I think this is why you sometimes see people that go into a place like for a year or 2 years and then quit, is because, they'll say it was misalignment, or they'll say, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be, or whatever. But often I feel like that's not even enough time to do what where it is to find out, why are things done this way, what we intended to solve, and where are we going. It's almost like that discovery phase where it could be a time needs to be put to discovery. And so I think going kind of full circle into our career advice for women when it comes to knowing when it's time to leave, I think it's almost becoming clear to me that it's almost more important in some ways, right? Especially in the beginning, for younger women or people newer to a job, to know when it's time to stay, and when you haven't given it that fair chance. Because going back to that job hopping, it needs to be strategic, right? So I think knowing when to stay is making sure that we're taking emotion out of it, making sure that we're not, I love the expression, stretching. What was it? Stretching versus suffering. I love that, because we've got to know that just because things are uncomfortable, that doesn't mean that we are suffering, or that, it's doomed, right? It's because it might be uncomfortable. That could be an opportunity for growth, to learn something new. We all should be continually learning, even at the very highest of levels. So, I think knowing when to stay, I mean, like, what else would you say about like knowing when to stay? I would say, making sure you understand things, make sure that, you're not just running from uncomfortable. I think those are important. But what else would you say? Like, how do
I think another big thing is, I know most of the women in my life, and I'm this way, there's a, fight or flight mentality. And I think when things get uncomfortable, sometimes our tendency is to flight. And sometimes it's just one of those situations where, we kind of go through, and I've been there, I've done this, you kind of go through a little bit of an imposter syndrome where you're like, maybe I'm not good enough for this job because things are really tough right now, really busy right now. I'm really overwhelmed. I'm really stressed right now. But can you see, is it going to, get to, is there going to be an end to this project or this customer thing, whatever the situation that you're in at the time, can you see that there will be an end to it? But I think there is just such a mentality. Again, I am completely guilty of this, and this is why I know this. And a lot of the women that I talk to is it's a very realistic feeling of I don't want to work like this.
Right.
Not that it's necessarily wrong. It's necessarily bad. I don't want to work like this. So my immediate reaction is, okay, I'm going to go put my resume out.
This isn't a fit for me anymore.
Correct. And then in a couple weeks it'll pass, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that was just our natural instinct kicking in, going, I don't want this pressure. I either left this pressure from a previous one, and sometimes it literally has to do with almost a PTSD scenario of a previous boss or a previous situation where it was very toxic, and one thing triggers you and you get into that automatic, mode. And it's the stretching versus suffering, right? You have to get through that bit. And then I feel as if the biggest thing is, don't make a decision in the heat of the moment. Don't make a decision in the middle of a stressful scenario. When these decisions are made to leave, I feel that you need to be in a level-headed situation to think of the pros and cons. I'm a big pros and cons person.
Lists.
Yep. I have a spreadsheet for everything in that scenario, right? So to me, but you make those lists when you're calm.
Yep.
You don't make them when you're frustrated or having a bad day or something's not going right, or you're arguing with a coworker, or your boss just got mad at you or yelled at you, whatever.
Or it was review time.
Right. Right. So you have to sit back in a calm time to then look at it to make a rational decision. And I mean, that's true with anything in life, but I think that in this scenario, it is especially true.
Absolutely. And the word or the phrase that kept jumping into my head as you were talking too is self-regulation, right? Is understanding what is emotional, is making sure that we are self-regulating. They tell you just like you should never get a haircut when you're having any kind of specific life event or mood or thing happening. I would say the same is true of a job, right? Review time, review time, acquisitions, any of those, someone else gets promoted, those kind of things, someone else gets a raise, whatever.
Right.
Those kind of things are not times when you should make snap decisions because self-regulation becomes difficult. And likewise, when things are going on in your personal life, it begs the question, or we should be asking ourselves, is this really about work? Is this really what it's about, or is it about something else in my life? Or maybe I'm feeling disrespected somewhere else. And so I'm carrying that over into work and I'm feeling disrespected here. Is it because I feel like no one listens to me at home? And not me, my husband listens to me all the time. But no, you know what I mean? Like,
yes, I do.
For some women, is it that, right? Is it my kids are teenagers and they're being, pains in the ass? And so I'm feeling disrespected all the way around and nobody listens to me and I don't have any authority. And all of a sudden we're projecting that onto work.
Right.
So those would be, a time when, maybe it's time to stay would be what you're saying. Don't make decisions in the heat of the moment. Don't make sure we're self-regulating, make sure we're self-aware, all of those things, because what it boils down to is if we leave, it needs to be strategic, not emotional.
Correct. And then that's part of her story, back to what we were saying before. It becomes part of your story of why you got to this decision. Not that you have to share it with anyone, how you got to this decision, but knowing how you got there and what you went through to get there will tell you whether it's right or wrong.
Right. Leaving a job shouldn't feel like failure. It should feel like clarity. Like this is for a reason.
Absolutely.
Yep. So if you are sitting there out there in the audience and wondering if it's time to give up on your job, your line.
I know. I'm like, where are you though? I don't know where we are.
Closing takeaway.
So we what? Oh, you skipped down. I see.
Oh, did I skip the section?
Yeah.
Oh, what did we skip?
It's okay. No. You're okay. Leaving a job isn't failure. It's clarity.
Yeah.
And sometimes the bravest things you can do is quit.
Right. And quit right. So basically I would say, ask yourself, is this the right thing for me? Is this going to forward my career? Is this the best step I can take for myself professionally and personally?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you can't, at the end of it is it ending your energy or expanding your evolution, right? So like I said, when I had the situation, are you always exhausted at night? You don't have time to take care of your, don't have the energy to take care of your family or to do anything outside of that. That's where it's ending your energy.
Yep.
So that's, to me, that was a big red flag for me. Right.
Yeah. Am I running away or am I moving to? And I think that is sometimes a question to ask ourselves too, is if I feel like I'm running away, then I probably haven't done all the work, right? I probably haven't done all the work I need to do. If I feel like I'm moving to, growing to, moving forward, then that's probably a good sign that it is the right move, because you can't grow where you're constantly shrinking, but you have to be sure that you're ready to grow and that you're not just hiding. You're not just running away, because you can't run away from yourself.
Right. And you have to make sure too that you're not just running into the grass is not always greener.
Right.
I mean, we have to be very careful and strategic in making these decisions, because the grass is not always greener. Just because it's there doesn't mean that it's the right one for you.
Very good point. And that's unfortunately, what I think a lot of us think a lot of times is, well, at the next place, I'll be respected, or at the next place, I'll get all this opportunity or whatever. And we, again, can't run from ourselves. If we haven't done the work And if we aren't prepared to do the work, we're not going to find a better situation. So I think, it all boils down to almost everything we talk about is knowing yourself, right? Really.
Yes.
And maybe that's why it becomes easier as we've been in our career longer
Agreed.
and get older. We really know ourselves more. And I'm able to say, for example, and I'm sure you are, when I'm feeling emotional or when I'm able to objectively look at it and go, I'm being emotional about this. I need to give it a week, right? I need to give it time. Versus when we're younger, we don't know ourselves as well. We think, okay, we're not willing to accept that maybe this is me. Everything is them. And sometimes it is them, but we need to be able to know the difference, right?
Absolutely.
And maturity is knowing when it is us and when there is more work we can do.
Absolutely. And, there are those times where it is the other person, and sometimes it's just the person sitting next to you, not your boss, things like that. So you have to determine, is it worth sitting through to get through this other person? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's not about your boss, it's about coworkers, it's about colleagues, and that creates an issue too. So you have to determine, what is the issue? Is it higher up? Is it next to you? What aligns those? Again, it's that list. It's the, strategic placement of, where do I go? What do I do? And what does that look like for me monetarily, business wise, profession wise, reputation, all of those things.
And, another whole subject, and I won't go in, and we're, time, so I won't go into this long one, but probably something we should talk about in the future is making sure that you don't get yourself into a situation financially, emotionally, whatever, where you have to stay, right? And maybe that should be our next one, is how to make sure that as you're coming up in your career, that you are making smart business decisions, you are making, smart money decisions, that you are thinking strategically, because if you are not doing that, then you can get yourself into a situation where you can't leave, right? Because you can't, you don't have runway, you don't have, backup. And then that way you can't leave until you have something else lined up, and so that's another trap to watch out for, I would say.
Right. Absolutely. So drop your story in the comments. What made you finally walk away from a job?
Or what made you stay? When did you decide maybe you shouldn't walk away?
Right.
Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share it with a friend that you think might find it helpful, and maybe who is this close to handing in their raise to help determine whether they should or should not do it.
Right. Because sometimes quitting isn't giving up, it's growing up.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great note to leave on. So thank you.
All right.
Great conversation as always. Have a great night.
You too.
Bye everybody.